Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes. In this video we're going to be taking a look at another one of the faction cruisers, this time around the Angel Cartel Cynabal. Now as you guys know, the Angel Cartel is probably my favourite of the pirate factions, and yes, I do absolutely adore the Cynabal. It's not my personal favourite faction cruiser, that award as you know goes to the Ashimu, but I do think this is right up there with the Phantasm as one of the most powerful, both for PvE and for PvP. So what we're going to do then in this video is to have a look at the Cynabal. We're going to have a look at its stats, its attributes and its fittings, and talk about what makes the Cynabal and how it actually achieves what it does. We're then going to look at the relevant skills that I have that showcase both this ship and an idea of how to start training into it if this is a ship that you are keen on flying. Then we're going to put all of that together into a ship fitting guide, which will then undock, take into space and showcase in action. So if you do enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, subscribe to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell to never miss an upload, and of course let me know in the comment section down below what videos you want covered, what topics you want to see me cover on this channel in future. And if you want to help support this channel and keep this content coming, you can do so by joining us on Patreon. Details are on screen now and in the description below. All that said and done then, let's jump right into talking about the Angel Cartel Cynabal. The Angel Cartel are one of the 5 pirate factions currently available in EVE Echoes, alongside the Serpentis Corporation, the Guristas Pirates, Sanchez Nation, and the Blood Raider Covenant. Please don't ask about the Serpent Sisters of Eve, Mordu's Legion, or the Yan Zheng. I don't know when those are coming yet. The developers haven't given us that information. Anyway, the Angel Cartel themselves are based mainly down in Minmatar space. So if you're heading out to somewhere like the Great Wildlands, Scalding Pass, Wicked Creek, Immensea, Cache, those kind of areas, you will start to find Angel combat anomalies. And if you head right out into the middle of Nullsec, you should start to find Angel dead space anomalies. If you and your friends clear a dead space anomaly, amongst the loot you may start to find Angel Cartel wreckage, Angel Cartel debris. You can then use that debris to reverse engineer the blueprints for the Drumiel, the Macariel, and the Cynabal. Now, as far as the backstory of the Angel Cartel goes as well, these guys are kind of like our modern mafia. They're a big sort of family-styled organisation that has its, like a big crime family kind of thing, that has its fingers in all of the different pies. If you work for the Angel Cartel, the cartel will look to protect you, you and yours. Obviously, it's that sort of family, you're one of us attitude to it all, but they do kind of also hope that whilst you're on your off time, the wages that they've paid you, you're probably going to dump straight back into the cartel on illegal drugs or prostitution or whatever other illicit activities they've got you addicted to. They're not a pleasant bunch of guys, but hey, that's kind of what you'd expect from evil space pirate mafia. Anyway, beyond that as well, they did manage to find a load of Jovian technology. They've managed to uncover Jovian technology within sort of the recesses of Curse, it's theorized, and they've used that to build some very unique looking and individual ships. Now the Cynabal, of course, is one of those. As far as unique and individual looking ships go, this is right up there. Very curvy ship design. I do love how the propulsion units, the 6 of them, are on the sides there. Though it's got this weird sort of black carapace to the back that reminds me of the Electra, which is the fused wing casing on the back of a Beetle. It's a very unusual ship that is ever so slightly reminiscent of a cockroach, if I'm not too proud to admit, but a very cool looking ship nonetheless. Anyway, let's then have a look at the trait description here for the Cynabal and talk about what makes it a unique ship. First of all, as an Angel Cartel vessel, it has the roll bonuses that you've seen on the Drumiel and on the Macariel as well. 50% increase to warp speed, 50% increase to warp acceleration, and a 5-second increase to damage control activation time. Now that 50% warp speed bonus gives you a total warp speed here in a Cynabal of 4.5 astronomical units per second, 4.5 AU per sec. That means you can actually warp across systems very quickly, and the 50% increase to warp acceleration means you achieve that warp speed faster, and you hit that 4.5 considerably faster. Allows you to move from A to B, relocate from combat site to combat site, whether that's encounters, anomalies, or PvP combat sites, very, very quickly. Very good for redeployment. The 5-second increase to the damage control activation time means that your damage control unit, if you have one fitted, goes from activating for 13 seconds all the way up to 18 instead. I'll be honest though, a damage control unit isn't something I tend to fit on a Cynabal, simply because it has a decent amount of tank to it already, but if you are going up against very big targets and you're worried about taking insane like blap damage on the way in, then the damage control unit can be very useful to have, and having those additional 5 seconds is a nice bonus to have. Looking then on to the skill bonuses here of the Cynabal, like every faction cruiser out there, it gains bonuses from Advanced Cruiser Command and Advanced Medium Weapon Operation. In the case of the Cynabal, that's Advanced Medium Cannon Operation, of course. It is a Minmatar Angel Cartel vessel, so cannons are what we're looking at today. 5% increase to medium cannon damage, and a 5% reduction to medium cannon activation time. Obviously 25% increase, 25% reduction at Advanced Medium Cannon Operation 5. Now, this is kind of working both ends of the DPS calculation. Damage per second obviously can be increased either by increasing the damage or the number of shots within the time frame. In this case, the Cynabal says, well, I'm going to have more damage per shot, and I'm going to be firing more shots. This is the cruiser to fly if you're the kind of person who loves spraying your opponent down with heavy-duty machine guns. Now, the Advanced Cruiser Command bonus here is a 7.5% increase to medium cannon tracking speed per level, and a 7.5% increase to medium cannon accuracy fall-off per level. That's obviously 37.5% at full training. This means that any of your cannons, if you are up close and personal in a brawling build, they will track and stick to the target a little bit better, and if you do go for an artillery build, obviously having those strikes track a little bit better is always useful. Plus you get the extra accuracy fall off there, even though if you're using autocannons, the accuracy fall off is still very nice, as it means that you can actually, if your orbit's not exactly at optimal, it takes that accuracy fall off slider and makes it much more gentle and gradual, so you can be further away and doing more DPS. Very, very nice bonuses across the board there to the cannons, all purely aimed at dealing as much damage in as short a time as possible. In regards to the attributes and fittings here of the Cynabal, we have one drone tube that can launch small or medium drones, 5 high slots, 3 mid slots, 5 low slots, 3 power grid rigs, and 3 mechanical rigs, with a power grid output of 949 megawatts. That's a decent sized power grid output, and does mean that we can just about start to fit some strike cannons and such into here. Not quite enough to really start fitting oversized modules, nothing really seriously anyway, but it's possible, but it's not something we're really going to look at in case here of the Cynabal. It's more about that ability to just kind of to deal with the strike cannons if you wanted to go for a Cynabal artillery, which everyone frowns upon, but is a perfectly viable build. Anyway, cargo hold 800 meters cubed, nice big cargo hold, good for picking up loot if you are mission running or going PvP and you just want to pick the bones of your target afterwards, and defense is nice and tanky, 20,517. Now, an interesting fact here about the Cynabal is that the shield and the armor tanks are inversely equal, by which I mean they are both 5,781 hit points, and the total there on the resistances works out the same. Yes, okay, the shields get a 20% thermal resist, whereas it's 35 on the on the reverse. But if you were to add all of those resists together, they do equal out. This actually means that the Cynabal itself can be shield tanked and it can be armor tanked, and you may want to change that tank either depending on your skills or depending on what you're going up against. So when I showcase the fittings later, we will talk about that in more detail, but for now, basically take it as if you're going up against like a Mar, and thus there's going to be a lot of electromagnetic damage, fit for armor tank. If you're going up against something like the Minmatar, anomalies there, and you're going to have a lot of explosive damage, swap onto shield tanking. You just literally swap out the modules you want, and the ship will run absolutely fine. It's a really interesting point there about the Angel Cartel, and I think a lot of people just tend to autopilot shield tank a Cynabal. They don't think about what the tank is going to be. They just put shields on it, because obviously the Angel Cartel anomalies drop shield equipment. So they just kind of go, well, okay, if the anomalies are dropping shield equipment, that means it's a shield tank ship, and that is not the case here with the Cynabal. It can be shield or armor, and both are perfectly viable with very good reasons to go for one or the other depending on the situation. Now the capacitor here is nice and large as well, 3002 gigajoules, nice aggressive capacitor recharge rate of 12.38, 7 maximum lock targets is fairly standard for a ship of this size, but talking about ships of this size, that signature radius of 70 meters, that is destroyer-sized signature radius on a faction cruiser. Very small signature radius on a very powerful ship. It should ultimately, no other cruiser is quite that sort of size, which, yeah, very important point there with the Cynabal. The flight velocity then, 292 meters per second. Again, as far as cruisers go, that's pretty nippy and works quite nicely to allow us to speed tank against larger targets whilst we blap into oblivion anything that happens to be smaller than us. A scan resolution of 423 meters as well is also pretty powerful as far as cruisers go. It locks on surprisingly quickly. Okay, you're not going to be using a Cynabal as the point on a gate camp anytime soon, but in combat anomalies or in PvP, you don't struggle too much to lock onto a target. Again, the warp speed there of 3.0 AU per second, that does get doubled, does get a 50% increase thanks to the roll bonus, which actively takes it up to 4.5. Worth noting that that does mean you can rig for additional warp speed if you wanted to, then the bonus applies on top of that. Then we have a very low mass actually, it's only 9,047,000 there on the mass, very, very low mass for a cruiser, with a very low inertia modifier as well, which makes this thing incredibly nimble, able to relocate very easily, allows you to maintain tight orbits, allows you to accelerate and decelerate very quickly as well. Anyway, let's then have a look at the skills. With almost any ship in EVE Echoes, the skills that you should prioritise training are the ones that are mentioned explicitly in the skill bonuses. That means with the faction cruisers, of course, the first one we're going to look at is Cruiser Command, specifically Advanced Cruiser Command. Now what this does as a basic naked skill is reduces the inertia modifier of your cruiser whilst increasing its velocity. Faster moving ship, able to accelerate and decelerate faster and maintain tighter orbits. Nice skill to have across the board anyway, but absolutely vital for the operation of faction cruisers thanks to how their roll bonuses are, and if you're not fully training into Advanced Cruiser Command, there's no point really flying a faction cruiser, because if you're only going to go to Advanced Cruiser Command 4 and stop there, you're missing out on an entire tier of the skill bonus. Now beyond that as well, navigation of course is a useful skill to start training into here for the Cynabal, because the Cynabal itself is something that we are looking at in regards to speed tanking. Training into Afterburner is always going to be a nice skill to have. You can see this reduces the amount of capacitor required to actually activate an Afterburner, whilst increasing the Afterburner's activation time. This means you are paying less to activate the Afterburner, and you're paying less frequently. Overall, that is a massive net increase to your capacitor stability. On top of this as well, it increases the velocity bonus that the Afterburner grants you. Basically, it makes your Afterburners cheaper to use and better. Well worth training into. As well, interestingly enough, obviously being an Afterburner skill, it doesn't specify small, medium or large, so it does actually affect every single ship that you have with an Afterburner. Even a frigate will get a bonus from that as well alongside your cruisers. Under maintenance technology, with the Cynabal, again, it can be either shield tanked or it can be armor tanked. You can kind of go either way on this, so it is well worth training both shield operation and armor operation, at least to sort of 4. Not much at all in the way of skill points just to get it to 4 there. What that will do is reduces the activation time of your armor repairers or your shield boosters, so you're actually healing up faster, whilst also reducing the amount of capacitor required to do so. Ultimately, pick which one you're going to use most first of all, whether you're going to be shield tanking or armor tanking more, but going for both in the long term does really help the Cynabal out. Under engineering, this is a key skill for the Cynabal as well. Cruiser engineering, I've taken up to Advanced 4. This is important for power grid and for the capacitor capacity, allowing us to maintain a nice stable capacitor. There's a lot going on with something like the Cynabal, because it's going to be brawling, it's going to be up close and personal, it's going to have a lot of systems active. Having a good capacitor capacity is vital to the operation of the ship, and certainly we will actually rig for extra stability on that later on. The power grid, as I said, isn't a humongous issue with the Cynabal unless you're trying to fit strike cannons onto it, at which point, yes, every additional point of cruiser power grid is absolutely vital. Now, I normally talk about electronic warfare a lot here too. Electronic warfare basic to 5 is very useful for the Cynabal because we will be using a Nosferatu. That gives us here, you can see, Energy Nosferatu optimal range plus 15% and accuracy fall off plus 10%. That just means that we can activate the Nosferatu a little bit earlier, and if we happen to lose that orbit, we can, it's got that additional optimal range and gentler accuracy fall off, meaning it is more efficient over range. Not a vital skill to have, but certainly a nice one. Finally then, of course, are the relevant weapon skills. With the Cynabal, it is getting bonuses from Medium Cannon Operation Advanced, so we want Advanced Medium Cannon Operation all the way at 5. In addition to obviously giving the ship bonuses, you're also increasing the damage of your medium cannons, plus their tracking speed. And once you start hitting Advanced Medium Cannon Operation as well, you're also increasing the amount of time that your gyro stabilizers are active for. So an additional 2 seconds there doesn't sound like much, but that is, in some cases, as many as 2 or 3 additional shots across the board, and it just means that your gyro stabilizers, heck, it's 2 seconds per activation. And in a protracted fight, you may be activating those gyro stabilizers multiple times, at which point, if you've activated it 5 times, that's 10 additional seconds of gyro stabilizer. Medium Cannon Upgrade, of course, also a very useful skill to have here, and this also increases the damage, but not quite to the same factor as Operation. Operation Basic 5 is 20% damage, Upgrade Basic 5 is only 15% damage, but it does give accuracy fall off and optimal range boosts as well, which means you can start applying your damage better and at further range. Both of those are very useful skills, even if you're using autocannons or strike cannons. Whichever way you use it, the additional tracking speed given from Operation helps you stick to a faster moving target, whereas the upgrade allows you to start applying that damage from further away and gives you a gentler scaling if your orbit isn't absolutely perfect. Certainly, training into both of those is a key point, and ultimately a dedicated Cynabal pilot is going to want to have Medium Cannon Operation, Advanced Medium Cannon Operation, Medium Cannon Upgrade, and Advanced Medium Cannon Upgrade all the way up to level 5 on all 4 accounts as soon as possible. My personal favourite fit for the Cynabal is a Captain Benzie special up close and personal auto-cannon brawling build. This leans heavily into the Cynabal's skill bonuses of medium cannon damage and medium cannon activation time. Essentially, we're looking at that and saying, okay, if you want to be a 500 meter long Gatling gun platform, that's exactly what we're going to turn you into. Which means we are going to, of course, be using medium autocannons. Gistum C-types in this case, a full brace of 5 of these in the high slots. Very high DPS at 170, excellent tracking speed for a medium turret of 80.94. This means you can actually quite comfortably track and still blap away at things like frigates and destroyers. You do have a very short optimal range of 2.66 kilometers, but the accuracy fall-off is so ridiculously long and gentle at 16.89 kilometers here that it doesn't actually matter. If you're at 3, 4, 5 kilometers, you've barely lost any DPS at all, thanks to that very gradual accuracy fall-off. In fact, you can see that the cold DPS here of this Cynabal is 871.85, and that's with me only being at 4.5 operation and 4.4 upgrade. Obviously, if you are dedicated into the Cynabal and you're training those up higher, that stat only goes further. Now, we achieve this with the low slots here of having 2 gyro stabilizers fitted. Obviously, having a gyro stabilizer fitted gives a basic flat bonus to the damage of 5% per gyro stabilizer, and activation time reduction of 4.3% per gyro stabilizer. And if you activate these, if you heat them, that's an even bigger boost that lasts for 23 seconds, thanks to the skills I have. And I will showcase just how insanely high that goes in a moment. Now, in regards to the tank here, you do want to go for an active tank with the Cynabal. It is more than capable of dealing with it, as I said, either as shield tanking or as armor tanking. The particular build here I'm showcasing is shield tanking, but you can easily change this to armor tanking just by swapping them for the relative modules. By which I mean here, I've gone for a Gistum C-type medium shield booster. That is my active shield tank that is going to keep my shields healthy and strong themselves. Obviously, you then swap that out for something like a Corellum C-type medium armor repairer. And same here with the Gist C-type adaptive invulnerability field. Obviously, when this is active, it increases those shield damage resistances across the board by 36.49%. Remember, that is not straight on additive. That does work in a very specific way that I showcased in my How Tanking Works video. I won't waste time talking about it here. If you're not sure how resistances actually calculate, that video will explain. Ultimately, again, if you are going for armor tanking, you just swap this out for an adaptive armor hardener, obviously preferably at dead space level. If you're going to be flying a faction cruiser, you should really be fitting dead space level or at least meta level 8 across the board. Anything less than that just feels like you're missing out, really. Now for the mid slots, because we're going to be so close, of course I've gone for 2 Vricolarchus medium energy Nosferatu, I do hope I'm pronouncing that right. That has a very light, a decent optimal range here of 10.56 kilometers, which ideally we should be in at all times, and we'll be sending across 74 gigajoules of capacitor every 5 seconds. Not only does that help drain my opponent's capacitor in PvP, but it also helps fuel mine in PvE, allowing me to keep that shield booster and the adaptive invulnerability field active at all times. Or again, if you've gone for armor tank, it'll allow you to keep your armor repairer and your adaptive armor hardener going at all times as well. The third third mid slot is an interruptive stasis webifier. I would ideally go for a predator. Unfortunately, I just ran out of ISK at the last moment. Essentially, the better interruptive stasis, stasis webifier you can get, well, the better your ship's going to do. 13-kilometer range with a 57% flight velocity adjustment. Means that anything that does get close to me, I can web it, slow it right down if it's a little bit faster, like a frigate, like a slasher for example, and then blap it with the drones and with my autocannons. Now, whichever drone you go for is entirely up to you here. I've gone for a Mark 7 Valkyrie because I have a few of these lying around, but I do also have a Mark 7 Vespa in the drone bay that I can swap to. Ultimately, whichever drone you go for doesn't overly change all that much. Yes, go for the one that is going to affect your damage type the most. If you're going up against armor tanked ships, then using a Valkyrie is an excellent option because it deals explosive damage, whereas swapping to something like an Interceptor is much better, Infiltrator is much better if you're going up against shield tanks and you want that electromagnetic damage to help you cut through that. The Vespa and the Hobgoblin make a nice middle ground there. I can never remember the name of the Glente medium drone. But there we go. That's your mid slots, that's your high slots, and the final thing in the low slots I forgot to mention is, of course, a medium afterburner. No point really going for a micro warp drive here. It's, in my opinion, going for a micro warp drive makes you too fast, but makes your signature radius absolutely massive. So you don't really get much in the way of benefit out of the micro warp drive. It also uses up a lot more of your capacitor, and will take this particular ship with the skills I've got out of capacitor stability and into the range of, I think, about 2 minutes worth of capacitor, which quite frankly just isn't enough for me for PvE, which is what I mainly use the Cynabal for. Now for the rigs here, the combat rigs for the Cynabal, I've gone for two of the cannon burst aerators, 12.5% reduction to activation time. Again, we're leaning fully into that Gatling gun approach, extra damage, extra activation time, plus a cannon collision accelerator 3 here, for the 17.5% increase to the damage bonus, straight up extra DPS. For the mechanical rigs, auxiliary thrusters 2 help us to get a little bit of extra flight velocity, and allows us to actually sort of, close that gap, speed tank that little bit better. You can see that with this fitted, my cold, before activating the afterburner, cold flight velocity here is 438 meters per second. Very fast moving cruiser. Secondly then, a polycarbon engine housing drops that inertia modifier down even further. You can swap this out for a second auxiliary thrusters too. Ultimately, the extra speed can be beneficial. I just personally like having that little drop to the inertia modifier, although as we've seen, the inertia modifier of the Cynabal itself is already very low. So you can also swap this out for something like a polycarbon engine, a dynamic fuel valve, just to increase your capacitor stability. You could go for something like here in the low slots. Again, I've gone for a semiconductor memory cell. I am capacitor stable without this, but it just makes me a little bit more stable if someone happens to hit me with a Nosferatu or a neutralizer, especially in PvP. It's just that little bit extra padding that allows for a little bit more safety, so I don't have to flee away as quickly. Ultimately, the one here that you can swap out is that polycarbon engine housing. Whether you take that for a dynamic fuel valve, whether you go for the extra lock-on speed of something like a targeting matrix, is entirely up to you. Or you may find that you don't quite have the cruiser engineering skills yet, so adding on a second memory cell capacitor or whatever will allow you to increase the capacitor stability and help maintain that. Now overall, as I said, that gives an incredible offensive DPS of 871.85 cold, and we will always be in the drone range as well. Defensively speaking, 23,359, spread there quite nicely between shield, armour, and structure. Obviously we've changed with the shield and that thanks to how some of these bits have been fitted here, and thanks to some of my skills, mainly defense upgrade on cruiser. We are then also looking in the targeting here, signature radius, as I said, 70 meters, good scan resolution of 486 millimeters, and a fast flight velocity of 438 meters per second. Notice here as well, we can achieve warp from a standstill at 2.84 seconds. That's not quite the magic number to avoid a non-bubble gate camp, but it is fast enough that a human error will play a factor, and in a standard situation, if someone's just trying to lock onto you before you fly away, only the fastest ships will actually be capable of doing so. Now the Cynabal can quite comfortably do some of the Tech 10 storyline missions, but I didn't have any of those available, so instead I've jumped into an Angel Medium Anomaly Tech 10 just to showcase how ridiculously simple these are. Now as we've appeared here, what are we looking at? We've got a Maelstrom Striker, 2 of the Gist Slasher 2 Interceptors, a Cyclone 2 Guardian, and a Rupture Interdictor. So we're going to lock onto all of those targets and we're going to take out the small ones first. Now of course with medium cannons the tracking speed is always going to be a bit of a problem when we go up against a small and fast moving target like an Interceptor, especially an Interceptor 2 and a Slasher Interceptor 2 at that. So we are going to have to kind of slingshot maneuver. As you can see, I'm not orbiting the Slasher 2 itself, I'm actually trying to get to move away or directly towards that Slasher 2 Interceptor to reduce my angular velocity against it. With a web of fire and a very low angular velocity, bam, we can blap it fairly quickly, move on to the second one, and repeat that same process. You'll see obviously my optimal range may be 2 kilometers, but I'm targeting here from 12. I'm then going to move in towards it in a moment to try and get a better angular velocity against it and see if we can't do a bit more damage as it comes in, get some stronger hits on this, because the 181 just isn't really much. So if I move towards a different ship here, I change the direction that I'm flying in, that then changes the Slasher 2's Slasher 2 Interceptor's orbit around me, and now as you can see, I'm moving in an almost straight line away, and straight away 1301 damage hit, almost takes it out in one hit. It's all about finding ways to drop that angular velocity. Now, with the small targets out of the way, we can move on to the cruisers and the battle cruisers and the battleships and start taking those out, and with some nice strong hits there. Now, I did say I would showcase what it was like with the gyro stabilizers active, and you can see with both of them active here, we shoot all the way up to 1,338.59 DPS, which frankly is insane. And you can see how quickly the autocannons there are cycling. The damage that this can kick out now at this point, I'm doing nearly 2,000 per activation, is just utter madness. That Cyclone 2 Guardian is going down at a frightening pace. And in PvP as well, this of course is an incredibly potent ship for that exact purpose. You basically lock on, you scram them, and yes, it is a warp scrambler you'd be looking at in this case, obviously. Swap out one of the Nosferatus for a scrambler because we're not looking for a protracted fight. Just hit them with everything you've got, and the speed that you can damage them, it's just absolutely insane. You'll rip through shields, rip through armor, rip through structure as well. Very, very powerful cruiser, insanely high DPS due to how fast it fires and the damage bonuses on this thing as well. And you can see I'm taking almost no damage in return here in this combat anomaly. With orbiting, we're nearly through that Cyclone 2. We're then going to move on to that Rupture Interdictor. There goes the Cyclone 2. 285,000 ISK for that kill, that'll come through later, and on to the Rupture Interdictor. Obviously, again, being a cruiser-sized target, we are fairly comfortable hitting this thing, no need to worry about using the web of fire or anything. We've just had a load of new skins for like Thanksgiving and that. I want to address the elephant in the room in regards to those. Obviously here we're looking at a Rupture Interdictor with the Gistum skin, sort of that silver. I really like that silver skin, and I really hope they add these pirate skins as part of it. But they did add golden skins for all of the different things for Thanksgiving, and Ruptures were one of those, the Hound, the Probe Covert Ops, and I think those were the 3 for Minmatar. the concept of a Minmatar pilot flying a golden ship is, yeah, it's a little bit away from the background story of the Minmatar. I mean, obviously, if you're not aware, the Minmatar have a full third of their population enslaved in the Amarr Empire. The Amarr fly gold and ivory coloured ships as a show of their dominance. It's a very Amarr thing. So a Minmatar pilot piloting a golden ship is probably going to be considered by pretty much everyone around him as an absolute filthy traitor. It's just, you wouldn't do it. You would not paint your ship gold as a Minmatar pilot. It's just massively disrespectful in the backstory. Now, I've heard some people argue that actually it's a little bit more sort of yellow and orange and olive and all that kind of thing in the colour, and it's like, yeah, but it's still pretty close to gold, isn't it? Now, don't get me wrong, some of those skins are absolutely stunning. The Manticore one, for example, alone, just, oh, check that out. Gorgeous looking skin, and same for the Moa, but not for Minmatar. Anyway, we are wildly off topic there. You can see now I am taking out this Gist Maelstrom, a Maelstrom Striker, Tech 10 battleship. Big, powerful ship, a lot of tank going on there, a lot of powerful guns coming off it as well, but they just can't hit me because of the speed that I'm going. As you can see, I've actually turned off the shield booster at this point, and I'm sitting pretty much at 100% shields, comfortably orbiting at the 5 to 6 kilometer marker here around this battleship, just slowly whittling it down. And I have to say, it's so comforting to be in a ship that doesn't take like an hour to get through like one battleship. Obviously here we've got this doing like 1,000 DPS with the 1,300 DPS with those gyro stabilizers active. Whereas I'm used to flying things like frigates and interceptors, that kind of thing, that maybe have 200 to 300 DPS as standard, 400 if you're a faction frigate. It's just nice to basically double and in certain cases more than triple that kind of DPS against targets here. I think we're coming up to about 7 minutes into this, and it's a medium-sized anomaly. I know something like when I did the Crew War video last week, that was about 7 minutes to finish the first wave of a small anomaly. So you can kind of get an idea of how quickly the Cynabal can clear this kind of content, and of course that makes for a decent amount of ISK income. Yeah, okay, the Cynabal itself is not a cheap ship. It's about 1.5 billion in total cost to get this thing fully built. I think it's, what, 200 million ISK just to turn the oven on, not including the materials. Not a cheap ship by any stretch of the imagination, very expensive ship, but it can earn that ISK back more than, and in PvP as well, it is a terrifying target to go up against. I mean, heck, there are plenty of things that I don't like to find in a combat anomaly when I jump in looking for a target, but quite frankly, it's the Cynabal that is right up there at the top of that nightmare list at the moment. It's one of the worst for me. Anyway, wave 1 now down, we're going to lock on to wave 2, and you can see here, again, we've got a couple of Slasher 2 interceptors. We still lock onto those surprisingly quickly, and I'm going to set a target here on the Gistum Rupture. That's going to be what I set as my orbit, so that hopefully we can get rid of that Thrasher Interdictor nice and quickly. I don't trust Interdictors. If you see an Interdictor, especially the Destroyer level ones in an anomaly, these are often the ones equipped with Scramblers. They tend to be target priority for me, and you can see I'm kind of throwing everything I have at this just to get that thing down. We'll then move on to the Slasher 2 Interceptors after this, but I would like to get that Interdictor Thrasher down first. It turns out that one only had a web, not a Scrambler, but better safe than sorry. Now again, we're going to do the same as we did in the first wave. We are going to target the Slasher 2 Interceptor with all of our modules, but then we're going to orbit separate targets to try and make sure that, or you can just double tap in space is another option for this as well. Essentially, we're looking for ways to minimize the angular velocity we have against this particular target. It does help if I put a stasis web of fire onto it as well, and onto the right target, not onto the Cyclone 2. There we are, onto the Slasher 2 Interceptor. You can see it's taking a while. I haven't even hit the blasted thing yet. I'm going to now set an orbit around the other one here, move toward that Rupture, and hopefully, again, that drags me in a nice straight line away, messes with its orbit. Oh, we got a slight hit, 24 damage. Better hit there, 988 damage, 286. You can see I'm doing a lot more damage as the angular velocity against that Slasher 2 Interceptor has dropped. Swap target onto the next one, send the drone in as well. and hopefully we can take this one out nice and quickly. They are your biggest threat in these, the small ships, things like the interceptors and those interdictor destroyers. Interdictor destroyers absolutely should be your #1 priority in all situations in these. Then go for the E-War module, like interceptors, finish off the other interceptors, and then work your way up the target priority again. So on to the Rupture Interdictor. Interesting that these are always interdictors, but I've never actually seen an interdictor cruiser use any form of E-War modules, let alone a scrambler or a disruptor, but hey, there we go. Anyway, folks, I think that's showcased quite nicely everything I wanted to talk about here in regards to the Cynabal. Incredibly powerful faction cruiser. I would argue it is right up there with the Phantasm as the two top of the range of the cruisers there. I personally enjoy the Ashimu a bit more, and I will do a video covering that one soon, just because it's a very different type of playstyle. But for raw damage output, nothing beats the Cynabal in cruiser level ships. This thing's damage is just utterly disgusting. Yeah, the Phantasm's a bit tankier and allows you to kind of go AFK in combat anomalies, but the Cynabal, oh, it's disgusting damage. 1,338. Just yeah, you don't see that kind of damage again until you start hitting battleships. It's disgusting, and I love it. Anyway, folks, hopefully that's given you some inspiration here with the Cynabal. I do hope to hear some cool stories of how you guys are flying them. Eventually I will actually come back and showcase how to use something like a strike cannon build on the Cynabal, but it's a lot to talk about, and I didn't want to bog this one video down on that. I wanted to showcase the fit that is much more fun and works much easier and is less situational. Hopefully that's given you some inspiration. Let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, folks, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.